obviously the call came because of my expose on Mike Daisy, but I'd spent the last couple of years doing stories about Apple's supply chain, and every time that I called them, they would never go on the record with me, and oftentimes they would just never call me back. I did a series last year about the environmental record of Apple's, some of the suppliers that were supposed Apple suppliers, and I always had issues trying to get a hold of them. So at this point, then, I was a little surprised that they called me.
Well, before you entered Foxconn, you actually spoke to some workers outside the premises, unbeknownst to Foxconn and Apple. Did their stories differ from what you heard inside?
A little, yeah. I think that I spent about a week with workers prior to my Apple and Foxconn coordinated tour. And I spent a lot of that time outside the gates talking to many workers, over 24. And I followed one worker's money back to his home village to see how it was being spent. But the workers, when they were able to speak candidly with me, they did have complaints about the management structure at Foxconn. But for the most part, they saw their jobs in this way. Many of them are from poor villages in rural China. And for them, this was a good opportunity to make money, save money, send it back home, and then hopefully at the right time, after a few years, go back home with some savings.
Because the average age of these workers is between 18 and 25. As you say, they come from a poor background. What are their dreams when they come to Foxconn? And then from the workers that you spoke to, do they have plans to leave?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, the dreams that they have in many ways, I spoke to a lot of people actually in one village about this who were sending. I think some of the people in the village said around a third of the village had left for Shenzhen for different factory jobs. I think that the consensus there was that many of the young people are leaving these villages because not really for the money as much as they are for just the chance to leave the village and see what the rest of the world is like. And since many of them know people who are working in factories, that's where they go. And I spoke to a lot of workers who seemed a bit disillusioned with the work that they were actually doing, because it is very tedious and boring work. And once they get there, what I found, at least from my interviews, is that they don't tend to stay very long. They usually tend to stay 2, maybe 5 years at the most.
Rob, I now want to play a clip of one of your reports for American Public Media's Marketplace. Let's have a listen.
The work is tedious and boring, but each day hundreds of people line up outside the factory to apply for jobs here. On this day, 500 applicants, many of them tired from traveling days from their home village, arrive with the hopes of working here. The supply is continuous. One reason is that compared to other Chinese factories, Foxconn is considered by workers to be one of the best. The company's invested millions into amenities like athletic fields for its workers. And unlike many factories in China, it pays its workers on time.
Rob, as we know, Foxconn has received a lot of bad press. Some of it, of course, is warranted. But at the end of the day, it is a good factory to work for in Chinese terms. Tell us, from what you saw, what you witnessed, what are conditions like on the factory line?
Well, I think that conditions on the factory line for workers, the work is obviously very tedious. It's very boring, and it's these are workers that are doing motions that last sometimes no more than 10 seconds, and so they do that for 8 to 10 hours a day. So I think on your body, I don't know what that would do to your body, but it's obviously psychologically it's very boring. But the conditions that I saw in the tour that I was given. I've been to factories before in China, and the conditions were, I thought, on par with what I would say decent conditions at a factory. I've seen a lot worse in my time in China, and but you also have to understand that the campus that I toured has 240,000 workers at it. I mean, this is one of the largest electronics factories in the world, and so to call it a factory is almost kind of silly, because it's actually an enormous factory campus. And so there are amenities like soccer fields and basketball courts and pools and things like that. So it's not a typical factory.
Rob, a Fair Labor Association audit was held recently. Last month, those findings were handed down, and some of those findings included excessive working hours, safety issues, and overtime pay. From what you found, has Foxconn acted on any of these findings?
I think that they've acted on the pay. Foxconn as a result of this audit, has agreed to, by next summer, switch the overtime hours. Right now, the limit is at 60, which actually violates Chinese labor laws. What they have done is they've given raises to the workers.
So, Rob, how much money are these people earning each month?
Well, you start out at Foxconn earning about $300 every month, and then that can go up. And a lot of workers who had worked for more than 2 years were making around more or less $400 a month.
So, Rob, with all this attention, with the world really, focusing on Foxconn of late, do you think that things will improve?
I think that's an open question. I think that depends on Foxconn and it depends on Apple. It certainly appears from my interviews with Foxconn's special assistant to their CEO that Foxconn is ready to make a commitment to change things. And he actually used a Chinese saying when I asked him about this. He said, 水涨船高, which means we have the power to raise the water so that the boats float higher. And so basically what he means is that we can raise the standards for the entire country of China just from the changes that we can make here because we are such a powerful force in China.